So my name is Helen White. I'm 57. I've lived on the Gold Coast for 24 years. And before I became a Christian a year ago, I had made a life and a career out of spiritualism and spirituality, Buddhism and Hinduism. So I taught yoga and guided meditation, guided breath work, and I used all sorts of talisman as well with that lifestyle, so tarot cards and crystals and those sorts of things. So I had made a life and a career out of that for about 30 years. When I was younger, I had gotten introduced to some dark magic and some black magic and black worship, Satan worship, from a friend at school. So we dabbled around in all of that sort of thing as well. I used to use a Ouija board, and I used to conduct seances, speak to spirits allegedly. So that was when I was much younger, and then that sort of transferred over into more, I guess, in the spiritual realm they call it more enlightened sort of behaviours. I used to meditate every morning when I got up. Like I said, I made a life and a career out of that, and it sustained me. It sustained me for 30 years. I felt like I was always, I've always been a seeker or a searcher, always looking for the next something. I was always looking for, so in spiritual terms, we're always looking for enlightenment and, finding the source and, where the source of creation was. And it was quite a big umbrella term that we used to reference the universe when we prayed. And there was a lot of sub-genres that came underneath a sort of a universal approach to faith. I believe I was born into the wrong family. I was born into a very broken, dangerous, dysfunctional family. I was one of 4 children. I was the third in the list. And I can remember my parents used to take us to church at Christmas time and at Easter time. But then it was very confusing for me because when we got home, my parents, so I can remember the Easter story especially. We'd sit at church for a couple of hours and be this perfect facade of a family. And then when we got home, my parents would make fun of the story that they just heard. They referred to it as like a fairy tale and just a story that could never be true, that, this man was born to a virgin and never did anything wrong on the planet and, was crucified and resurrected. So they thought that was all a big joke. They made a huge mockery about it, which was confusing to me because everyone was so serious when we went to church. And I think that's why I moved away from anything religious, Christianity especially, and moved more into the spiritual realm and, and the religion of Buddhism. Yeah, because of the meditation and the yoga and the spiritual aspect, Buddhism just sort of rolled into my life quite naturally. Yep, so when I was younger, the girl that I mentioned who was a Satan worshipper, we used to do a lot of, but now that I look back, very dangerous behaviours. But I sort of left that behind as I was growing. I left home and I left school when I was 15 because my home was too dangerous a place to be. So I left school, got a job and got a little bedsitter and was living by myself when I was 15. And then that sort of rolled into other jobs. I was in hospitality for a while. And then when I was probably about, I want to say 18 or 19, I got introduced to intravenous drugs. So I was a heavy drug user for probably 3 or 4 years. And I drank socially, but it was I was a complete addict for that amount of time. And then, so there was always even if there wasn't the specific Hinduism and Buddhism, there was always the spirituality stuff. I believed that I received messages, and I was still using a Ouija board then, so making contact with spirits on the other side. I would have prophetic dreams. I'd dream about things and they'd come true about people. And then as I evolved I was a personal trainer for 25 years, and as I evolved through that, that's when the yoga and the meditation took a bit more of a hold, and then I discovered Buddhism, and then Hinduism was a big part of the yoga classes and the yoga structure as well. It really came out of the blue. I would get up every morning at 4:30 and meditate before I did. It was the priority for my day. And nothing specific even happened. I was just going along in life, and I woke up one morning to meditate, and I went and got myself set up like I normally do. Nothing different happened, and I sat there for probably 3 or 5 minutes, and I don't know, I just had this sinking feeling inside me. So I just went and got back into bed, and then every morning after that, for a few mornings, I just couldn't be bothered getting up out of bed. I just felt like I didn't have the heart for meditation anymore. And I actually thought, so I was 56, so I actually frightened myself, because I thought, am I having a midlife mental breakdown? Everything that had sustained me for 30 years all of a sudden didn't make any sense. It was almost like I didn't believe in what I used to believe in. And I thought, should I just drive myself to the hospital and get admitted to the psychiatric unit? So all of this was sort of swirling around, and then I went online and I started searching for the next guru, or the next, breathwork coach, or the next certificate to do to further my studies, and none of that. I just had this big hole inside me that, just none of it made any sense anymore. And then I was sitting at home, crying, couldn't figure out what was going on in my life, and my phone beeped, and I turned it over and opened up the screen, and there was the City on a Hill website. And I actually burst out laughing, and I actually said to God, you're not my default. You've picked the wrong girl. Like, I don't even believe in you. So I found that quite amusing. But then after I went through the website and I listened to a couple of sermons, and I saw Sam on the video, and I just had this nagging feeling. I just couldn't shake this feeling for the rest of the week. So on September the 3rd last year, I just turned up to City on a Hill. I think I was probably crying as I approached them, as I walked in the door. I just felt, I just didn't know what was going on in my life. It was so foreign to me, because I always had a plan and a structure for everything. And it was like the bottom just dropped out of my whole world, but for no reason. So yeah, I think I was crying. I felt pretty lost and pretty broken when I turned up at church. I didn't really know what I was doing at church. And I didn't know, I had no idea what the questions were, but then I also didn't know what the answers were I was looking for. Everything was just a mess. But I was, just by this group of strangers, I was hugged and seen and heard and welcomed and made to feel, from the very first day that I walked into church, I was just made to feel like such a blessing to these complete strangers, which was lovely. So half a dozen times I wanted to turn around and go back home, because I didn't know. I mean, church when I was younger was very structured and very disciplined, and I didn't know if I wanted to sit through that again. But City on a Hill was so relaxed and so more casual, and I was completely terrified when I drove myself to City on a Hill that first Sunday. And all the way in I thought, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't believe in God, I'm not even supposed to be here. But once I got welcomed, and a couple of the girls came and sat with me through the service, and then once the service started, everything inside me just completely changed.
So it was pretty instant.
I think I spent the whole service crying, I was crying because it was so beautiful, and I'd never heard worship music before, and I just had this overwhelming sense that I had, at 56, found my way home. I just felt like I was I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Yeah. I didn't even know people like City on a Hill existed in the world, and everybody was just like I said, I came from a very broken, dysfunctional, dangerous family, and my whole life all I had ever prayed for was to belong to a real family that would just love me and wouldn't hurt me anymore, and all I wanted was a normal home, because mine was so abnormal, and that's really what I felt. Those were the overwhelming feelings when I was in church, and the worship music was just so beautiful. So Sam took my number and called me for a coffee, and even that I didn't want to go because I'm like, what are we going to talk about? What's going to be the subject matter? He said, just come along and we'll just have a chat. So I think I pretty much cried the whole coffee date as well. I was very emotional. And Sam listened to my story, which was quite painful for him to think that another human being had to go through that when they were a child. And my whole life I was nobody's daughter my whole life. My family apart from the other things that they did, my family just abandoned me and neglected me. And I've never felt very loved or very worthwhile as a human being. And then when Sam said to me, can I pray for you? Which made me cry even more. And then when he prayed for me and he told me how much Jesus, and I didn't know anything about Jesus or God. And when Sam told me how much I was loved, and it didn't matter how broken I thought I was and how unworthy I thought I was, and it didn't matter what I had done in my past before I knew Jesus, he said that, that I was chosen by him, I was set apart for him, I was absolutely adored and cherished by him, and that I was his daughter. And so that was, I didn't really believe Sam at first. I have a habit of not trusting anybody. But then we had more coffees, and I had hundreds of questions, and he answered every one of them so patiently. And Sam was always there when I had questions, and we had coffees, and he just let me kind of unpack it at my own pace, which was really lovely. When I went to church on Sunday, I thought, I have to wait another whole 7 days to come back. I couldn't wait to get back to church. And I've been there, apart from 2 weeks where I was sick, in the last year I've been at church every Sunday. And then I spoke to Sam. I'm pretty sure I was baptised as a child, but that wasn't my choice. But as an adult, and learning all the things that Sam was teaching me, and then feeling all of the feelings when I prayed to Jesus, feeling all of those feelings, just feeling so transformed inside myself and inside my heart, I just wanted to make my life just to serve him now. There was 2 moments that I can remember. When I read the story, the parable of the sheep, and I just thought, so, the shepherd, Jesus would leave the 99 sheep to find the one that had strayed from the flock. And when I read that story, I thought, if there was ever to be a story written about me, then it's that, because, I was the black sheep of the family. And I had strayed so far from what I'm doing now. And then when I read about the, leading up to the crucifixion, and I remember saying to Sam, how could somebody that was so beautiful and so perfect be treated so badly and be hurt so badly and tortured so badly and nailed to a cross for being a complete innocent? And that story of the persecution, the crucifixion, the resurrection was amazing. But all that story, I just felt so much pain and anguish inside me that I couldn't really explain about what had happened to Jesus. The more I'm doing the 365, read the Bible in 365 days. So and all I do now is listen to Christian podcasts and worship. There's worship music on my playlist every day, and I just feel like I can't get enough of everything to do with this walk with Jesus. I wish I had have known him earlier so that I could have loved him for longer, but I'm the kind of person, I was a competitive bodybuilder for most of my life. I don't really have a dimmer switch, so I'm either all on or all off. And so I just feel like I just want to pursue everything. I just want to know everything about Jesus, everything about the story, everything about how he wants me to be of service to him. Yeah, that was such a beautiful day. It was raining the day I got baptised. And since I already felt things shifting and moving and being changed in me before the baptism, and then after I got baptised with Jimmy and Sam, that all of those transformative I felt like my heart was going to burst. I was so happy, and now I try to wake up every morning to have that. My priority is to have my heart postured to the Lord in every aspect and every moment. From where I've come from and the things that I've endured, I really feel like, there was 2 occasions, so I was involved in a lot of illegal things when I was younger. There's 2 occasions where I should have been in prison, and there was 2 occasions that I tried to commit suicide. And now that I look back, now as an adult Christian woman, and I look back on my life, I can see so many instances where I didn't know God and I didn't know Jesus. I didn't even believe in Jesus. But I can look back now after this year of being baptised that I can specifically see that God had his hand in my life just time and time and time and time and time again. He's just, everything about me feels different. My children say I talk differently. They said you dress differently. Everything about you is just softer, and they're so happy that because they've seen me searching my whole life and never ever found the thing that I didn't even know I was looking for. And that's probably the most amazing part. Like, I didn't know that I needed Jesus as much as I do need him. And it makes me feel a bit guilty and ashamed that, but it makes me appreciate and really understand how magnificent he is, because I thought I was in control of my life. But yeah, like I said, when I look back now, I can see where God has had his hand on me all the way through my life. So, and it's true what they say, even when you didn't know him, when I didn't know him, and he was probably the enemy to me because I was on the other side, he still pursued me, he still wanted me, he still loved me. And I feel like he waited for me to, kind of get my act together. He knew. Yeah, I really feel that. So all the things in the old days when in all the spiritual realm, you know, I'd do a new course or a new certificate, and there would be a little honeymoon phase where I'd be so excited about what I was doing. And then the bottom and it happened every time. I'd do a new certificate or I'd go to a new retreat, and I'd come home after a few days still on that high. And then all of a sudden, it was fulfilling while I was there with the group of people learning. But then when I was back to my own devices, it just felt so unfulfilling. And I was quickly looking for the next thing to focus on. So I felt like I was constantly on this hamster wheel, and whatever I was looking for was just out of my reach. But since September last year, my desire to follow Jesus and to know Jesus has not dimmed. If anything, every day that goes past, I just feel more on fire to spread his word and to tell people about him, and I think it's more a feeling inside me. I felt like my whole life I walked around with this big gaping hole inside my body. I could never fill it, and I tried to fill it up with everything. And now that big gaping hole kind of sort of feels like this now. And I mean, I pray constantly through the day. I'm always in some sort of communication with Jesus. I let him lead my days, lead my choices. It feels, I've never felt the way that I feel inside myself from loving him. So I hope there's not a honeymoon. Yeah, I hope there's not a honeymoon. Like I said, it's not falling off and not getting lukewarm. It's actually the fire's getting bigger and brighter. And when I was a Buddhist and I studied Hinduism, there was hundreds of deities and gods that you could pray to. They all had one did this and one did that. So I never really knew who was hearing me and who was listening to me. And now that I just have the Father and I just have Jesus, I've just got one person to direct all of my energy and all of my prayers and all of my love to, and then I feel that reciprocated back from him instead of it feeling scattered and all in sort of bits and pieces. The control thing I'm still working on because when I was I was a single mum. I brought up 2 children on my own, and being a bodybuilder and a single mum, I had to micromanage everything, or else the wheels all fell off. So, but I have, I feel so much more free. And for the first time and it's so strange, I've felt Jesus touch me, although we've never met, and I've heard thoughts and words in my head that aren't from me, even though I've never heard his voice, but I just know that he is constantly with me and constantly around me. In my past, I always felt like a kaleidoscope. So I felt like a bunch of pretty broken shards of glass that were all scattered and fractured and separated. But now that I devote everything that I am to Jesus, it's like all of those scattered coloured pieces have come together and they just make this beautiful picture now. Yeah, I didn't even know that I needed Jesus. And now that I have him and I have this relationship with him, sometimes I scratch my head and think, how did I even make it this far without him? Because I used to micromanage my whole life, I mean, there was things that were completely out of my control, and I'd have anxiety and I had depression, and this it was like the smallest thing that would be a obstacle or a hiccup would throw me completely out of balance. And now it's so hard to verbalize and to put into words. Like when I pray and I say thank you, that just feels so insignificant compared to how I actually feel inside. Like, thank you's not even enough of a word compared to how profound having Jesus' love in my life feels. But yeah, everything is just so much, everything's not only easier, I feel so much more content and fulfilled and peaceful. And then when anything does pop up, I'm not trying to figure out which deity controls abundance or prosperity or wealth or health or, I just, and surrendering was never in my vocabulary. But surrendering to how powerful Jesus is, it just makes me feel so free, so free and so content, and yeah, I just feel so peaceful inside myself now.